All right. So, welcome to the Busy Moms Book Club. This month, we are doing The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. I just turned the recording on so we can dive in. So, I wanted just to introduce myself a little bit, and you can go over to the chat box. We've had a couple people comment already if they have read the book. Totally okay if you have or haven't. I just like to gauge where everybody's at. So, my name is Laura Johnson. I'm a certified life coach and I help moms become who they're meant to be. I believe every woman has a calling that they're meant to fulfill on this earth, a God given calling. And I truly believe that when we step into who we're meant to be, that's when we're able to answer that God given calling. That's when we're able to be the moms that we want to be. So, that's what really lights me up. That's my passion. That's where I get really fired up. So, what I love to do with this book club is I like to explore different areas of our life that helps us do that. So, just to give a little bit of a background, I always like to start every book club. I like to start every book club with, you're in the right place if. So, I'm going to tell you just a couple things that you'll know that this is like the perfect book for you. Um, let's see, I'm looking for it. Okay, perfect. So Karen, thank you for that. So Ashley, welcome in. If you want to, you can go over to the chat and tell me if you've read the book or not. Either way is okay. I just like to gauge where everybody's at. Okay, so you're in the right place if you've questioned if you're depressed, but you're still functioning at a very high level. You have more good days than bad days, and you realize that maybe it's not depression, but you kind of feel like you're in a funk, just kind of like you're not really yourself. Okay, Ashley, so you say you haven't read it. Perfect. You're in the right place. So we're going to go through the whole book. Okay, so another one, you're in the right place if you think you should be more grateful. Maybe you have a really good life, but you just are constantly telling yourself you should be more grateful. Another one is if you have a wandering mind, that sometimes you're dreaming of your younger self where you didn't have as much responsibility and you felt more free, or maybe you're dreaming about when your kids are out of the house and everything will be magical then. Or you're in the right place if you find yourself always being busy. I call it like living in the land of busy, where you have no time for yourself, you have no time to play with your kids, you have no time to take care of your body. You even don't have time to have like date nights with your husband, or you're too tired for sex, or any of those things. Living in the land of busy. Another one is if you have a lot of guilt for not being happier. Again, like we all have really good lives, but you feel really guilty that you're not living in the present moment and really taking it all in. Okay, Ashley says, that's me. Lately, I'm in so much of a funk and I'm dreaming of another phase of motherhood. So common, Ashley. This you're in the right spot. That's I won't go too much into it, but I get really fired up about this. So yes, this is what I loved about the introduction for the book, The Happiness Project, that by Gretchen Rubin. So it looks like this. Okay. And what I love about this book is she kind of starts out telling us like she didn't have a crisis. She didn't have like these really hard trials, which I make for really good books. I'm not going to lie. Like when you read those books, you get like really passionate about the trials that people have gone through. But that wasn't Gretchen Rubin. And she's the first one to say that is I wasn't having a midlife crisis. I had a really good life, but there were just some things that felt a little off. And I just had this thought that maybe I could be happier. Maybe I could feel that joy a little bit more. Maybe I could really feel like a deep sense of purpose. And so that's where she started. And I think, I truly believe that's why this book has become such a bestseller, because for so many of us, we are living really amazing lives. Some of us have like really big challenges, but for the most part, our lives are pretty okay. So what do we do with that? Like we're finally living our dreams. We're being a mom. Like we always wanted to be a mom, or, our kids are growing and they're out of the house, and that's great. But what's next? And that's what she found herself asking in this book. So what I wanted to preface this with was this oftentimes when we look at people, it's easy for us to diminish the work that they did. When I look at the happiness project, I thought, okay, well, clearly she knew she was writing a book, so easy for her to reach her goals. Like, I'll always diminish the hard work people do, because if I diminish it, then I can feel better about myself. So when I started reading the book, I was like, oh, that's perfect. She just happened to be just starting this project at the first of the year. Good for her. But what I noticed as I was going back and writing all of this for us was that she started the book talking about happiness in April. And she didn't start her project until the following January. So she had from April all the way to January to prepare for the project. That's incredible. Like, in and of itself, all the research she did, everything, like she spent that long just in preparation, which is very cool. So I wanted to first point that out, that when we're looking at our goals, when we're setting ourselves up for them, there is a lot of preparation that takes place before we even get started. And that is a critical part of any goal setting, any projects, anything that we're looking at with regards to happiness or anything, any other aspect of our lives. So I wanted to first point that out. Okay, so the next thing, sorry, I'm just letting somebody else in. So she starts out talking about what is happiness. And I like what she said here, that she said she didn't want to wait for a crisis to remake her life. And I think that's really important for each one of us. Maybe you are in a crisis. I feel like a lot of people are going through really hard times right now. So this is still applicable, but we don't have to wait for those crises to take place before we can really dive in. So what she says, so her first question that she started out with is, what is happiness? And if you have a piece of paper and pen, or even if you don't, maybe go grab one, I want you to really ask yourself this. So anytime I'm working with my clients, when I'm coaching them, we want to define the words that exist within our brain, because if we can define them, then we know the beliefs that we have about them. So her question is, what is happiness? And she got to work on answering this first for herself and then doing a lot of research about this question. So what she really got down to, which I love, honestly, because I think people are funny and I related a lot to this. She really got down to the first definition of it is, I know it when I feel it. I'm like, yes. I'm like, why do we have to get so complicated? So I just loved the definition. She's like, I'll just know it when I feel it. Yes, that's exactly it. And then the second part of that is that what she really got to was the application of happiness is much harder, which I think we can all relate to. Whether that's a goal for happiness, whether it's a goal for anything else, application is always the hardest part. So what she spent in that time from April all the way to the beginning of January was creating a system where she could apply, where she could really get to work on creating something where she could consistently be working on this for a year and these resolutions. So I'm just going to turn that light. It seemed like it was okay. There you go. You can still see it. So what she did as part of this application process is she did three things. Okay. So the first thing that she did is she created 12 commandments, and I'm going to read these in just a second. So these were commandments that like laws that she was going to keep for herself, which I thought was really a great idea. So then the second thing she did were the secrets to adulthood. And these were lessons that she had learned that she wanted to apply as she was reaching this goal of greater happiness. So she created her secrets of adulthood. And then she started figuring out what were the resolutions that she wanted to work on each month. So what I thought was interesting about this was she didn't want to call them a goal that she was working on for the month. She wanted to think about it as a resolution, a lifestyle change that was permanent, not a goal with a timeline where there's an end date, but a resolution of creating a different lifestyle that promoted happiness. So in this, all these three things were to help her in the application part of happiness. So I'm going to read a couple of her. If you have the book, it's in the very back. Okay. And let me see if I can find, oh, shoot. I thought I marked it. So what I love about her Secrets of Adulthood is they're very basic lessons, but they were lessons that meant something to her. Things often get harder before they get easier. That was one of her secrets to adulthood. So every single time she started working towards one of the resolutions, and we'll talk about those in just a second, she first spent time reminding herself of the lessons she's already learned so she doesn't have to relearn them. So like this, things often get harder before they get easier. Most decisions don't require extensive research. That I think is such an applicable lesson for me because I really had to learn that for myself. And that is a huge secret that I used to spend months researching Christmas presents. But in reality, I could just go to the store and not worry about all the reviews. I could just buy a present that I know my kids would love. But if I looked at it online, then I would get caught up in all the reviews. Let's see. Don't expect to be motivated by motivation. Sometimes we can minister to the spirit through the body. Everything looks better arranged on a tray. Like they're just fun things that she just knew for herself, but that as she was moving through these resolutions, she was always visiting. So let me see if I've got her. I think it's back here where she talks about her 12 commandments, which are so fantastic. So again, these were just things that she decided for herself as she was working through them that she was going to do. So I'm going to read through the 12 commandments. The first one was be Gretchen. Second is to let it go. Third, act the way I want to feel. 4, do it now. 5, be polite and be fair. 6, enjoy the process. 7, spend out. 8, identify the problem. Lighten up is the 9th one. Do what ought to be done. 11 is no calculation, and 12 there is only love. So just as she was working through these resolutions, these were the 2 things that she always, like the parameters she set. And you can Google those. You don't even have to buy the book in order to do that. But what I wanted to challenge you was to figure out for yourself what your commandments are, and really like spend time thinking about what is the thing that you want to set for yourself. What do you want to live by? So as I was thinking about this, in each chapter of the book was her next month of the project, is how she laid it out. She always talked about be Gretchen. That was her first commandment. And I've been thinking about that, and actually was telling my friend Amy, who's on the call right now, about this, how I went to, it was a favorite things party. And it was in a neighborhood. I'm newer to the neighborhood, so I don't know a lot of these women. And when I went to it, like, you're supposed to bring your favorite things. And for me, I just love, like, I really was trying to be Laura as I was reading this book. And I was really trying to funnel my inner Gretchen on, like, knowing what I love and being able to show it from that place. So what I did is I like to cut off pieces of my plant and to grow them and to give them as gifts to people. So I had my plant that I grew and I shoved it in like a Ziploc bag so the dirt wouldn't spill everywhere. And I love like rocks. Like I'll always have jewelry that has different rocks in it. You can't see it right now, it's behind me, but I have like my little container of rocks that I've collected. And I like to study the different meanings of rocks. Like it's just something that I'm passionate about. And there's stories, ever since I was a little girl, with grandparents, we collected rocks. So there's meaning behind it. So I showed up really like trying to, like, as part of my happiness, be more Lara, channel that inner Gretchen. And people were bringing out like kitchen, like cool kitchen gadgets. And they were bringing out like tanning oils that they use. And then there's me who brings out my little plant in a jar and that I've grown by myself, and like a necklace that has like an onyx rock in it, and then I've got my little rocks. But gosh darn it, I was myself through that. Even though like I felt kind of awkward in the moment, I was amazed at how much happiness I felt when I was able to live that commandment of being more myself. And that's truly what this whole project was for Gretchen as she was going through it, was that was that was always the underlying layer that she went back to, was being more herself. So when she was creating these resolutions, there was always, like, every single chapter that was like a pattern of, like, okay, be Gretchen. What would Gretchen do? What does Gretchen love, in these resolutions? And I think that's so important. I know, and not just I know that's so important, as I see that with my clients every single time they set goals. If they're goals they think they should do based on some cultural expectation, they are less likely to achieve them. But if it is a resolution or a goal that helps them become more of themselves, they always stay with them. And that right there is the difference between really being happy and not, staying in a funk or not, really being able to encompass who you are and infusing that into every area of your life. So I wanted to share that story with you before we start diving into these resolutions that she had each month. Now, and I mentioned this at the beginning before a couple people got on, I'll write them out, but I want you to think, as I'm writing them out, what you want to set for your own happiness project this year. Maybe your happiness project is a month long. Maybe your happiness project is a week, or maybe it's a year. It doesn't matter. But I want you to think, between here and Christmas and New Year's, what would you put into your happiness project? So I'm going to write down what she did in the book, and we're going to move through it very quickly. I know that it's right before Christmas, so we're not going to spend a lot of time going through each of these, but I wanted to open it up to just have open coaching if anybody needs help in preparation for the New Year's and goals, in preparation for Christmas. And if nobody has coaching, then we just end early today. So I did want to leave that for all of you. Okay, so as I'm writing these out, I want you to write it out for yourself on what your happiness project would entail. What would be the resolutions? So for January, she made a resolution to boost her energy. And she called that her vitality resolution. Okay, her second, she wanted to remember love. And that was, she was focusing on marriage. So what I thought was cool about this, just as I'm writing these out, is that she had, I guess I'll write it over here. She had the overall, like, overarching umbrella, okay, of happiness. And within each of these, she figured out, what are the things that I want? So she wanted to focus on marriage, and she wanted to focus on vitality. But then the resolution was, how do I focus on marriage? So right here, this is a good example. So she wanted to focus on marriage, and she wanted to focus on it by remembering love. So that's how she created her resolutions. So for March, she wanted to aim higher, and that was under the category of work. She's got, excuse me, for April, she's got lighten up. And that was under her category of parenting or parenthood. We're just going to say parents so we don't squish it. We've got May. Be serious about play. So I'm just going to write play. And that was under leisure. Like, she wanted to actively relax in her life and have fun playing, which I thought was great. Okay, so 6, she's got June. Let's make sure you can still see. Okay, June, she has take time for friends. And that was under the category of friendship, obviously. We've got July. July was buy some happiness. And some of these I'll come back and explain briefly, because I think this is a good one to explain. That was under the category of money. Okay, let's make sure. Okay, we're getting close to the bottom. She wants to contemplate the heavens for August. And And I love that one. So she wanted to really take an eternal perspective on things. She wanted to study people that have been through really hard things, again, because she wasn't waiting for a crisis in her life before she wanted to remake it. But she still learned a lot from learning of others that have been through crisis. And so she kind of described that in the book. So September, she said she wanted to pursue a passion. And that was under the category of books because she is clearly a book lover. She is an author. Okay, so we're going to move over here. So October, hopefully you can see that. October was pay attention. And she wanted to do that under mindfulness. Okay. 11 was November. And she wanted to have a contented heart. And she wanted to develop a better attitude. And then 12th, she wanted to do for December. Let's make sure you can still see that. December, she wanted to do a boot camp where she applied all of the resolutions for 1 month. She called it her boot camp perfect. Okay. I'm going to kind of cross that up. Okay. So within every single one of these, and this is where, I'll be honest, like the book overall, the umbrella of the book, I really was able to encompass it. When I was in the weeds of each of these chapters, it felt like I was in the weeds at time. There were some really good points that she brought up, but really it was very much like a documentary on this is what I did. This is the lesson. Like it was very much play by play. But I think the biggest thing that I learned as she went through her documentary, we can call it, of her happiness project, was that it wasn't easy. Again, where my brain and where everybody's brain often wants to go is, okay, well, she must be really good at this. She's an author. She's used to doing this. I'm going to diminish the work that she did. That was very much not the case. And she was open and honest about that. She was honest about, in the month of marriage where she got really kind of snarky with her husband and wanted to give up on it. Or she talked about it, not that she gave up on the project or her marriage, but she just wanted to not forgive or not really focus on it. And she said, there were days even where she just didn't want to think about it, but then she came back to it. Or when she was talking about, there were lots of different things where it was just really hard for her to stick with it. And I think that besides like being Gretchen, being my true self, I think that was my other big takeaway from this book was being able to always come back to our resolutions. She didn't give up because she took days or a week off. She was able to take whatever lesson she learned in that time that she took off and then applied it when she came back to it. And that's for every single one of us. The more often we come back to our goals, the more likely we are to change and to become happier. And that's an important lesson for every single one of us. One thing that I did want to mention that I actually really love, she talked about in buying some happiness. She said she really, so I guess that would be like the third lesson. She really went against the grain on a lot of people as she was going through this project. And I think it's important for us to recognize that the more we are ourselves, the more we will go against the grain of other people. There were many people that came up to her while she was doing this project that disagreed with her findings for herself, or that had scientific research that proved otherwise. And she just like shut it right out. But one of them was that money can't buy happiness. And she said, for a lot of people, that is the case. You see a lot of people that have a lot of money that aren't happy. She said, but money in some instances can buy happiness. It might be short-term happiness, but it can also be long-term happiness. It can create memories for your family. It can, and she said there's two types of people. There's the underbuyer and the overbuyer. And she said both of those, it's creating a healthy balance between both of those and being intentional with your money. And so that's what she said, buy some happiness, like intentionally purchase things that fuel that happiness or the things that you're learning or things for your family. all of those things, which for me was a big lesson that I had to learn for myself. Um, the other thing that I was going to mention in October, where she talks about mindfulness, she talked about different ways of creating mindfulness. Again, this is her going against the grain and being more Gretchen, which I think gives us all permission to kind of go against the grain. She hated mindfulness, like genuinely hated it. She even tried something called laughter yoga in the process of trying to find some kind of mindfulness that she liked. And she just didn't, she said it was amazing to watch other people. This is what she was saying in the book. It was amazing to watch other people, how this laughter, happiness, laughter yoga really lit the fire and they would just start laughing hysterically. She said that just was not the case for her. It was not something that she enjoyed. She said she's gone back to it a couple times to try and see if it's different. But she said what does work for her with mindfulness is taking some kind of thought that stood out or some sentence she read in a book and just thinking about it. And I think that's so important for us that we hear so many of these trendy things that we should be doing. Again, going back to these cultural expectations. Mindfulness meditation for me really works, but it did not work for her. And she was unapologetic about that. So if you're creating a happiness project for yourself and you're trying something and it doesn't resonate with you, give it up. It's all right. You don't have to keep pushing yourself to it. Find something else that does work for you and go against that grain. And don't worry what other people think or say or science says or any of that. Like she really, like she was very deliberate in conversations she had. But one of the things she did say was that she learned when she disagreed with people not to argue with them. So if somebody has a different opinion than you and they love mindfulness and you don't need to argue with them. You can just let it go and agree to disagree. So that was another lesson that I did learn from her. So this is the basic basis of all of it. And there was one quote. Let's see if I can find it. So what she kind of starts with for yourself and what she got to at the very end was that there is a fundamental truth about happiness. And this was kind of where she wrapped up. She says, really question for yourself, what makes you feel good? What activities do you find fun, satisfying, or energizing, excuse me. She said, what makes you feel bad? Because the opposite of happiness is unhappiness. And she clarifies that in the book. It's not depression, it's unhappiness. Very different things. So when you're looking at like what makes you happy, you also get to figure out what makes you unhappy. What are your sources of anger, of irritation, boredom, frustration, or anxiety in your life? And then I think this next question, she says, is there any way in which you don't feel right about your life? Do you wish you could change jobs, city, family situations, or other circumstances? Does your life reflect your values? And I think that's a really important thing. Most of us can feel inside of ourselves when something's a little off, when we're not in alignment with who we truly are. Um, I've been in that place for a lot of years, previously to, I call it like before coaching and after coaching, like BC and AC for myself, where I was able to see very clearly that I was out of alignment with who I wanted to be, and I was not caring for myself, and I was trying to fit into the perfect mold of what a Christian mother looked like, and it was not. It didn't resonate with who I am, and I had a big like come to Jesus moment with myself where I had to be more Lara, and that right there changed everything. And that's where I would really encourage you to ask yourself this question. Is there any way in which you don't feel right about your life? And look at that and question why you're keeping yourself there if you don't feel right about it. So then the last question she has is, do you have sources of an do you have sources of an atmosphere of growth? In what elements of your life do you find progress, learning, teaching, serving, challenge, and increased mastery? And that's one of the things that I've noticed the most with my clients when I'm working with them is that I work with my clients for 6 months at a time. And for most of them, it's the first time they've ever stuck with a goal for that long. And being in like immersed in this atmosphere of growth, where most of the time we give up on things, and being able to immerse themselves in this, they get extraordinary results, more than they ever thought possible for themselves, because they've finally been immersed in it. So I would challenge you to really put yourself in those situations where there's an atmosphere of growth, because those three things: what's good, what feels good, what feels bad, and where, or I guess four things, excuse me: feels good, feels bad, you don't feel right about, and an atmosphere of growth. Those are the four things that as you're creating your happiness project, those will be your guiding factors in creating it for yourself. And being able to then create, this umbrella where you've got happiness as the goal and moving forward. So you don't stay stuck in a funk where you're not dreaming about different phases of motherhood, or when all your kids are gone, or when you die someday. Like I remember being there. I used to dream of like getting in car accidents so I could have a break in the hospital. Like I do remember being in those shoes. So just know that happiness is available to you right now. So that is the happiness project. What I mentioned at the very beginning, if you weren't on yet, I wanted to leave this last little bit. We're ending a little bit early today. So if there's any questions about the book, or if there's anything that you're struggling with, I will make sure that I turn the recording off. And if you're comfortable, we can coach you right here on that. And I want to make sure that you are in a healthy, excited place for Christmas and going forward into the New Year's. Also, I will be sending a list out for all the books for this new year. So I'm really excited. I really appreciate the suggestions that everybody brought last week, as I've been looking into those and exploring. So be on the lookout. I'll have a schedule for that. And I usually plan it 6 months at a time, because sometimes good books come up along the way. So I want to make sure that if something else comes up, that I can change some books out. Okay, so I'm going to turn the recording off. So thank you. You guys can stay on, and we'll just have